Good afternoon, everyone. I always get that spot just before lunch. Same thing as yesterday. We're very happy to be here, and thanks, Ronnie, for organizing a tremendous event here. I think it will be the first of many. We hope so. I thought about, what can I speak about today at this workshop on the intersection between healthcare and cyber. And the first thing that came to mind is a question whether there is such an intersection today, at least in the Israeli market. Okay, whether there are startups, whether there are significant initiatives outside of the HMOs and specific organizations which have a specific need that they need to take care of. Are there industry initiatives? Are there productized approaches to healthcare and cyber? And the answer is that unfortunately there isn't that many in Israel. We look at more than 300 cybersecurity startups every year, and I think that maybe, and Baral, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe one or two a year are at the intersection of healthcare and cybersecurity. But when we look at all the other startups, or many of those other startups, actually their applicability to the healthcare sector is tremendous. So one of the things that we already took away out of the preparation for this workshop is how do we bring the healthcare market and the cybersecurity market together, okay, to encourage Israeli entrepreneurs, specifically in cybersecurity and big data, to actually take their know-how and apply that to healthcare sector, which I believe has a tremendous opportunity. A little bit about JVP. So we're a venture capital firm. We've been around since '93. We manage about $1.2 billion, and we've invested in about 120 different companies throughout the years. We had the good fortune to have 31 notable exits, 12 IPOs, all of them on NASDAQ, and 19 M&As, for a total transaction value of about $21 billion, and we're ranked as one of the top 10 global consistent funds. So we are, one of the characteristics of JVP is that we're very thematically focused. We are the largest cybersecurity investor in Israel today, both in terms of number of portfolio companies. Many of them are located here in Be'er Sheva, in our center of excellence, just about 1 kilometer away from here. So many of them are located here. We're the largest in Israel, both in terms of number of companies as well as in the sheer amount of dollars that we put into the space. We also have some other spaces that we lead in Israel, like storage and big data and IoT, which also have a tremendous applicability in the healthcare sector, but I will not talk about these today. So going back to my initial kind of understanding or eureka moment that there is a problem and an opportunity here in the cyber meets healthcare kind of intersection, we went back to look at what is really the status of cybersecurity in the healthcare sector. And the first thing that we saw is that really the healthcare industry is not doing that well in terms of readiness for cyber attacks. Many organizations have, over 50% of the organization have network security that are of grade C or lower. That's pretty bad. Okay, if you compare that to banks, that's about 10% of such organizations that rank so low. 63% of the biggest, of the 27 largest hospitals in the US, again, have grade C or lower in patching, which is the network security and patching, for example, are the bread and butter of basic, I would say, cybersecurity hygiene. I'm not talking about advanced solutions for medical devices or pharmaceutical environments and so forth. So basically what we're saying here, what we're seeing is that the healthcare industry has a relatively low level of readiness in terms of cybersecurity. If we take a look from a bottom-up perspective, so that was more a top-down kind of a statement, but if we take a look from a bottom-up perspective on things like, for example, encryption. So all in all, we're seeing about 50% of the organization that use encryption for data at rest and data in motion. Now, Ziv gave an example of a very forward-looking solution for data privacy, but encrypting your data, encrypting the data on the disk in your databases, making sure that you use VPNs, for example, when you access your medical records and so forth. These are technologies that have been around for anywhere between 25 to 40 years, okay? And still we're seeing only 50% of such organizations are utilizing them today in the world. Network monitoring tools, again, the very, very basic of hygiene and network security, 50% of such more or less 50% of such organizations. So, and if we look at the regulation side, which in many industries served as a driving force for the adoption of such basic tools, we're not doing that well either. I mean, we can go deep into the individual regulations and so forth, but basically if you look at the FDA, for example, I'm talking now about the pharma sector and the medical device sector, many of the things that they publish are actually recommendations and not requirements, okay? So very much in contrast to what we see in other industries. We're seeing that in general, the level of recommendations trail, I would say, anywhere between 10 to 15 years on the state of the art in the financial services sector, okay? The financial services sector is indeed a very sensitive industry, but at the end of the day, it's only money, right? It's a lot of money, but only money. But the healthcare sector, which deals with individuals, drugs, procedures, and so forth, we're seeing that it's about 10 to 15 years behind. Another issue that we see specifically in the healthcare sector is that the medical certification of devices, drugs, and so forth, the need to dig deeper into the data once a new process or a new drug comes onto the market is actually hampering progress on the cybersecurity side, right? The need for a fully transparent environment, the need to approve new versions of every software that goes and updates a certain medical device is actually hampering the ability of a vendor or a developer to provide its customer with state-of-the-art security as part of their product. Okay, so there are fundamental regulatory and structural, I would say, limitations that limit the ability to narrow that gap. So, people, could have thought, okay, maybe we don't need that. If we don't have that and still we get relatively good service, then maybe, healthcare organizations are just not getting attacked as much as people fear. The sad story is that they are getting attacked. So if you look at 75% of the healthcare industry have been infected by malwares over the last year or so. Again, this is a very high number compared to other organizations. I'm not talking about the ability to block those malware at the edge of the network and we did our job, but rather organizations that get hit, that the malware actually bypasses their defensive lines and finds its way onto the critical systems. And 96% of the healthcare industry ransomware attacks actually targeted medical device and the medical treatment centers. So think of the hacker that actually targets those CT scanners, X-rays, and so forth, and other medical devices with ransomware attacks. And once they get onto the device, the ability to create damage, or both financially and of course physically, is tremendous. The hacker's motivation is also becoming widespread. There's obviously the nation-state kind of attacks that are just collecting massive amounts of data. For example, it's pretty well-known fact that many of those healthcare records hacks were driven by foreign governments, primarily in the US, trying to identifying data about specific individuals. Terrorists have already launched multiple attacks on hospitals, basically to test thus far, their ability to hamper medical care in acute situations, and we know that these attacks have already happened. And criminal intent is, there are many, many reasons why criminal organization, mostly trying to drive for financial gain, will attack a healthcare organization. We're seeing that in general, the market size for cybersecurity in healthcare is actually growing much faster than other sectors, where current estimates is that we're talking about a 5 billion industry today, and we're looking at about doubling that in 5 years' time. This is a relatively strong growth. These are a few examples of the attack vectors that we already see. These are actually attack vectors that we've seen in, I would say, in POC environments that we did with, that our companies had installed their solutions in such an environment. Again, they're not focused on the healthcare industry, so this is more of a side effect, if you will, of early adopters in that industry. And these are some of the attack vectors that we've seen. And I think that one of the most interesting vectors, and the ones that are not getting that much of attention, or not as much as we think they should, is the pharma companies that, you know, they are very, I would say, behind in terms of securing their production line. I don't need to share with you here what does it mean when someone can change the active ingredient in a recipe of a certain drug. And we're seeing, for example, the lack of separation between IT environment and operational environments in such production facilities is a major issue. Okay, I'll skip forward again in the interest of time. So when we look at the problem, we're really trying to look at it from a practical approach. We're not, we're not policymakers. We're not healthcare organizations. We try to identify whether there is a business opportunity for startups, mostly, to address those problems. Some of them I just mentioned, and we actually see that there are many, many such like needs that can be addressed by advanced technologies already available in the space. By the way, many of the examples that I'll give in a second are available 1 kilometer away from here. So all those examples that I'll give in a second are just short drive away from here. So these are specific examples where we think implementations of solutions that are already available today can create a major difference in the market. And I'll mention just a few. So for example, you know that Ziv mentioned earlier that he has this solution to create synthetic data based on real data and allow researchers to tap that in their upcoming research. Actually, in Ben Gurion University over the last few years, Professor Shlomi Dolev has developed a solution that can marry the two together. So you can protect the data at a level which is known as theoretically secure, meaning you can apply as much computing power to it as you want. You will not be able to crack the encryption code, but at the same time allow for computation to run on the encrypted data. Now, this is a kind of a contradiction that for many years existed between strong encryption and usability of the data, right? Because in order to use the data, you need to decrypt it. And actually here in the university, and Aneta is sitting here in the crowd, Professor Dolev has developed such a system that allows for multi-party computation on encrypted data at a level that is what's known as theoretically secure. This is a breakthrough, or can be a breakthrough for many verticals, specifically also for the healthcare records in research. Protecting doctors' connectivity to hospitals. So we are in an Obamacare era, right? Maybe it will change soon, but so far we are in the Obamacare era. And doctors serve multiple organizations and access multiple systems, and they want to have that all as a usable and user-friendly kind of environment. So we have a single device, they access multiple systems, multiple records, and so forth. But that's not properly secure in most cases. In many of those cases, and the data shows that at least 50% of those remote access is actually not protected at all, or where VPNs are wrongfully configured. Again, technologies are available today to allow for keyless, secure communication. These are being applied, for example, in the financial services, connecting ATMs to central offices of banks, okay, and can be easily applied in the healthcare sector. Again, it's an example of how I think, as an industry in Israel at least, we've failed to bring to the attention of startup companies the opportunity that exists in the healthcare sector. Pharmaceutical companies, the implementation of SCADA system on pharmaceutical environment is lacking. So we have some, I think, pharmaceutical companies here in the crowd. I will not talk about Israel, but if we look at European and North American pharma companies, the level of network security monitoring that they apply is just horrendous. They don't know even what devices are connected to their OT network. They don't know what kind of commands those devices issue. And other than having their industrial system controls specify recipes and processes and so forth into the production line, the level of monitoring that indeed this is what's happening is just not there. And again, there are systems, multiple companies in Israel that are addressing these problems. And I can go on and on, but I just want to conclude by saying we have tremendous IP here in Israel in cybersecurity. I would welcome any interaction with multinational corporations, with HMOs and others, to actually contextualize the implementation of such technologies in the healthcare sector. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. I think the level of solutions that we see here is unprecedented in terms of the efficacy that we can generate for the healthcare industry. But we have, or as an industry, as a cybersecurity industry, we've opted for the easy way, which is to go after the organizations that we know and have catered for many years, such as financial services, insurance, enterprises, and to a lesser extent, critical infrastructure. I think the healthcare organization, we're still seeing silos. So yes, GE, for example, is starting to do some things on the medical device side. For example, GE is working with a company from Beersheba called Morphisec on embedding some of their endpoint prevention technology into the medical device. Siemens has also did a few other things, and Philips is also pushing down that path. But these are mostly silo efforts. And I would think that we need to drive for more open dialogue and more open innovation around healthcare security, and for also updating the needed regulation on the topic. So with that, I'll conclude. I'll invite you, if anyone is interested, to continue this bottom-up kind of hands-on approach to things. We are hosting a roundtable later on today, and you're welcome to join us and continue this dialogue. Thank you.